Hi everyone, this is Freddie with Superbike Unlimited, and I'm excited to announce that we have a new project for you guys. This one, when we built this motorcycle early on, my intention was not to do what we did with it, which is go completely SBU style and just completely nuts and just extract the maximum out of the motorcycle. There's actually still some updates on this. If you've got a good eye, you might see some things on here that we haven't covered yet. For sure going to go into that later. But there's some really nice stuff to come for this motorcycle. But back on track, when we first started this bike, I mentioned that we were gonna make it street legal, and that we were gonna make it like a fun, bike to switch back and forth from a racetrack to the road. Well, the spec that we wound up building this to, and the nature specifically with the engine and some of the other components, the gearing and wheelbase, a whole bunch of stuff, how stiff it is, it really doesn't lend itself to street riding. It would be pretty maintenance intensive because it makes a ton of power. It's got that short close ratio 5-speed gearbox, and it just doesn't really make sense as a road bike at this point. It's essentially a race only machine. So an opportunity came up where we had a customer that we built a really cool KTM 500 EXC same year. I think it's a 21 or 22, and he decided he was a track guy and he wanted to get one of these for the track, and so he bought one of those and wound up letting us buy his 500, which we had built. So we'll go ahead and show you that. It's this bike right here. So this motorcycle, literally, it was essentially a mostly stock 500 EXC that had Warp 9 wheels, which are what's on it right now, and a pipe. I think that's it. And it was originally brought to us to do some tuning, and we put a standalone ECU on it. We put a get ECU, mapped it, wound up, this guy got the bug, started actually being a pretty talented Supermoto track rider, and was like, what else can we do? So we put Owens cartridges in it. We put a set of X-Trigs to get his trail back into a reasonable range. We put a proper Behringer top race kit on it, which you can see there. And we put a Suter slipper clutch. So this has basically everything you would need to just sort of go faster on a racetrack or have fun, even on a twisty road. It's got a good set of suspension. Oh, and we revalved the shock for him and set it up. So I still want to do street Supermoto stuff, and when this thing popped up, I was like, this could save us some effort, and we know that it's been cared for and that kind of thing, so let's grab it. So we're really excited because this bike we're going to go pretty nuts on again. So not necessarily, well, we'll see. That's the thing. I didn't expect to go as crazy on the other one as I did. I say that about this one. I'm sure the possibility is there. So to start, we're going to do some of the stuff that you guys have seen that worked really well on the 450, and I'm excited to test on this just in comparison, because we've had this bike on the dyno. Probably not going to really baseline it this time because we already have the baseline. We developed everything on this bike on the dyno already, so we'll be able to reference those graphs. But what we're going to start with is, and of course we'll unwrap all this stuff, but this is a full titanium dual DVR exhaust system, essentially identical to what's on the 450 SMR that you guys have seen. And funnily enough, we've been so busy around here, I actually bought some of this stuff way back, and we've just been slammed with other projects. I'm doing full electronic support for a pro superbike team, and that takes a lot of my time. So, and then customer projects here. So I haven't been able to do a lot of this stuff, and we've got this is actually the same canisters that are on the 450. They actually have a newer hexagonal can design, so I might update that at some point. I still really like the old ones, so for now that's what we're going to roll with. And then of course, even though this bike already has the get system on it, absolutely nothing wrong with that system. It works well. I'm just more fond of this system. It's, for me, I like the greater definition that I get with the calibration software. I'm able to tune it exactly as I want. This is a really powerful ECU. I'm familiar with the handlebar switch system. I'm just used to it. And I really value the ability to integrate these products. We can put this bar pad on top. I can use the Solo2. And with the Solo2, I can set up specific displays for track or street use with speed and that kind of thing. So I can get my GPS speed so I'm not ripping down the road at 20 miles an hour over the speed limit by accident. Things like that make a difference, So, and then also, of course, we've already come up with a system to quickly integrate a quick shifter, which I have here. And, so there's stuff that's already just set up. And, this is, since we're swapping out that lever, we're just going to put another Zeta lever on the other side to match. Really nice piece. Got some engine mounts here because the guy that had this bike before us crashed this bike a couple of times at the track and managed to break the very flimsy engine mounts, so gonna replace those. And then this is just our interface cable for the Solo2. And naturally, you know, this is the previous customer's livery. We're not going to keep that. We're going to go ahead and pop that off. So we're going to go, I've got an all set of black Cherby's plastics here we're going to put on, an SMR front fender. And that's going to be kind of the starting point. We have a whole bunch of really trick stuff for this. I'm honestly just scratching the surface with this first bit, but we got to get things moving. And I think this is a good place to start. So, and then once we get that pipe installed, of course, I'm going to have to do some custom mapping on this. There's not going to be, I don't expect there to be a base map that comes with this ECU that's going to be close for that pipe, because generally it makes a lot more peak horsepower on the upper end of the rev range. So surely we're going to have to put that on the dyno and do some work, which is fine. So we'll do that. And then we got a whole bunch of other super cool stuff that's going to happen in this motorcycle in future videos, because we're only gonna be able to fit so much in this one, but it's gonna be a really nice transformation. And by the time we're done, this is gonna be one sick street Supermoto. I'm excited. I haven't ridden on the street really in like years, so I'm excited to take this thing out and rip around a little bit. So stay tuned and we're gonna get right into it. All right, so we've got this exhaust unpackaged. You can kind of see what we're working with. And for those of you who haven't watched the old SMR videos that we made that kind of go into the reason why we're running this pipe, I'll kind of explain that a little bit. We've tested a whole bunch of exhaust systems for various Supermoto applications, and for sure nothing has come close to this in terms of peak horsepower. And what I mean by that is the practical application of most of these engines and the exhaust systems that go on them is not for track use. I mean, most of these motorcycles were largely developed for use on either a dirt track, like a moto track, or trail riding, or dual sport use, or whatever, but not supermoto use. So even if the bikes are supermotos, like in the case of the SMR, most of the exhausts that you're gonna get are gonna be for an SXF, because it's essentially the same base motorcycle. The great thing about DVR, this company is heavily used in the Supermoto World Championship, the FIM World Championship, which is kind of like the highest level of supermoto racing. And these systems are designed to be as linear as possible, so they don't have that kind of slope on the upper RPM that most of the moto exhausts are going to have, because those guys aren't trying to rev to the rev limiter and have it pull all the way to the top. They're really trying to get off of a corner quickly, and they want that like mid-range punch. These, we have seen you do lose a little bit of mid-range sometimes, not always, but you're going to gain considerably up top, sometimes as much as 4 horsepower. So it'll be really interesting to see what this one does, because we've not tested up a DVR system on a 500 yet. And this system is actually a little different than the one that we normally use, because there's generally what's called a power bomb, which is a resonator that goes right here. And I'll show you, for example, on this one, you can see it right there. So that doesn't actually do anything for like horsepower. I actually used to think that myself, that it was some kind of like tool that somehow improved exhaust pressure or something. I don't know, but I'm not an exhaust engineer, but I thought that they made the bike faster. Turns out those are literally just resonators. All they do is they reduce the final decibel at the back of the exhaust. So they're important for S1 GP because there's a very strict decibel limit, but we can't run those on this setup because of this guy. Specifically on the other side, you can see that fuel tank goes really low. So if you get a power bomb exhaust from DVR in here, it's literally that power bomb will touch the bottom of the fuel tank. And generally speaking, you don't want an exhaust header on the bottom of a plastic fuel tank. It could go sideways pretty quickly. So the other option, if you do want to run that power bomb exhaust, like if for some reason you were going to race one of these or you wanted it to be quieter, this bike takes an SXF style fuel tank, and that's the nice thing about KTM's. A lot of the parts are modular, so you could very easily convert this to accept that setup. But this is a street bike. I want it to have the bigger fuel tank. So yeah, we're just gonna get rid of that. And I don't care if it's louder. I kind of like when they're noisy. So especially on a road bike, it's probably not the worst thing if other motorists hear that you're coming. So that's that. These are all full tie. Of course, this has a wideband lambda bung, which we may wind up integrating into our data system at some point. And of course, this dash is also a data logger. It's going to record all of our ECU channels and a whole bunch of really anything that we want to add that's compatible with the Solo2 we can. If you want to use like the Smarty Cam stuff, that's their video camera system. Or if you want to add an LCU1, which is a lambda sensor that you can log alongside of your engine channel. So for example, we could put a wideband O2 sensor on this motorcycle, and if we go for a ride, we can look at our data throughout that ride and go, you know, at 33% throttle and 7,000 RPM, bike was a little fat right there, a little lean right there, and we can make an adjustment just from looking at that data. It's a really helpful tool. So yeah, next we're going to start stripping this thing down and see what it's like to get it installed. These do come with application-specific hardware, and sometimes it's really clear how it works. Sometimes it's not. So we're going to just kind of have to fill this one out and learn as we go along. All right, so now Martin's pulling this thing apart. You basically can see what we've got working with here. This is the Get ECU that we're going to be replacing, and again, nothing wrong with that. I just preferred the AIM unit, and this one is plug and play, as is the AIM that's going to go in. So literally has a factory connector. You do have to program the Taipan, because this ECU technically is plug and play for something like 50 motorcycles. They all use that connector, and they don't all necessarily have the same mapping and firing order, of course, because it fits 250, 450, 500 models, etc. And so you have to get if you're buying this for yourself, you have to use an interface cable. So the one like we're going to use to program this, you have to just set what bike it is, and then you can select your base map, which there's several free ones included that are both open or tunable, and then closed or, you know, locked out, which are maps that AIM's developed. It's got the stock pipe pulled off, which is pretty straightforward. He did have to loosen this left-hand side radiator to be able to get to the nut that holds the flange at the header. And now we're just going to sort of start mocking up the rest of it. All right, so Martin's kind of got this just sitting in here right now, and the reason for that, you can see the header's not connected, is because you don't want to put this collector or header on prior to getting this kind of at least in the right position, because this will not fit in here with the header mounted. So that mid pipe on the right hand side, it's important that you go ahead and get that sorted out. And it might be like that on the left too, I don't remember actually, but the either way, just don't bolt the header on until you get the mid pipes mounted, just to be safe. We're also going to reuse some hardware from the OEM system, which he's working with right there, which is just that grommet and the two aluminum sort of inserts that go on each side. All right guys, so Martin's been steadily chipping away at this, and you can kind of see the general idea. We're using this mounting bracket system that he's currently pushing in here, and essentially what that does is it adds a support for us to use this secondary bracket, which then uses a clamp on the back side of here, which you probably saw in our previous video. Exactly like that. Yep. And then but you do have to modify your subframe a bit, so we're gonna have to drill some holes. And that's pretty much it, right? I mean, and on this side, same thing, just drill a hole. Do you have to tap anything?
There's a hole, and yeah, they give you a clamp here to line up. So that'll end up looking something like that. Perfect.
And as you can see, we're gonna have to cut away some plastic. Martin's already done a bit of that in the airbox area. Same thing, we had to do that before on the 450 project, just to get all the clearance that we need here. But just chipping away, so we'll keep at it. All right, Martin's got this thing pretty well hacked up. You can see kind of how much you got to remove to get all this. There's a lot here. He did a really good job of kind of blending that, so it's not so obvious, but there's a good chunk of material removed from there. And then in there, you know, you can see all that's gone. So that's necessary to just get this to fit without constantly rubbing or touching the plastic. So he's just going to apply some heat shield material like this right here that we use, just to kind of minimize some of the heat that's going to potentially affect intake air temperature. It's not going to have a huge impact, but we just want to try to minimize that effect. And while he's doing that, I'm going to start fitting some CMT fuel tank covers that I got here. This is kind of just a plug and play piece, and I'm just getting it because we're going to change this bike to be a pretty dark color, and I didn't want the contrast of this large fuel tank to stand out against the black plastics and black frame. So just something to kind of tidy up and keep the aesthetic going in the same direction. All right, so we've got this all fitted up, and I went ahead and got these tank covers installed on both sides. We're gonna go ahead and fire this thing up and see what it sounds like. Certainly quieter than the single exhaust, which we knew from previous experience. All right, now we're good and warmed up. We're going to give it a couple of blips. All right, so we've got this pretty well done. We do need to we're going to get with DVR. We haven't quite figured out this part yet because it doesn't align correctly. The 450 with this setup, there's a special bracket that goes there. You can see right there. So maybe we need something like that. We're not sure, but in the meantime, we're just gonna go ahead and knock out some of the other cosmetic stuff we've got to get to and performance stuff while we're in here. So of course, we already talked about the ECU stuff. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of our get ECU and Wi-Fi comm, which is kind of stuffed in the airbox right now. We're just going to take all that off and go ahead and put our AIM stuff on. But also Martin is assembling our new setup here. This is an actual, light's glaring on it, there we go. This is a KTM factory LED headlight, just something nicer to use, and it's not super expensive. Obviously it's made by that company instead of KTM, but and he's fitted that into our Cherubi's, what is that thing? I don't know what that is.
Cowl?
Shroud. Yeah, headlight shroud. So we're gonna go to all black bodywork for now, of course, and we're gonna put some vinyl on at some point, but this will get us going. All right, so we've got our Taipan installed, and it's kind of just resting here. We are gonna reuse the factory rubber boot, and you can see underneath this other bit, or I mean rubber sleeve rather, this rubber boot fits over the stock connector, which is again plug and play like the OEM one. And then these other connectors, essentially this one goes to our interface that goes to the Solo2 DL, and it does have a splitter that's going to allow us to use our handlebar switch, which is already plugged in and routed up here. All that's kind of set up and ready to go. We've kind of just stuffed all that in there. We've got a little bit of excess wire from the handlebar switch. That's where we're just going to put that for now. And then this other connector, this is our programming cable connector. This is from when we connect the USB adapter and we put it on the dyno. This one is our expansion connector. That's where we're going to plug this guy in. This allows us to run our quick shifter, and if we ever decided to add a second injector, we would do it through this connector here. We're only using 2 inputs on it right now, so that's basically that. And then while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and install this Alliant battery. That's a YLP05B. It's plug and play direct swap, and it's about 140 grams lighter than the stock lithium battery, so it's a substantial weight loss, and it has a little more kick than the standard one as well, so that's a nice upgrade. Always run these on KTMs. Yeah, and then we're gonna start buttoning it up. All right, everyone, so we've got this fuel tank pretty much fitted up with these CMT parts, and I've mentioned this before from the last one. I'll be completely honest, these don't fit the best. They never do, honestly. This, you can see there's a pretty decent gap right there. I mean, that's not really what I would consider to be an acceptable tolerance. So, these parts, they're not bad for the money, but they're also not gonna be what I would consider a top tier carbon fiber component. And they work well enough. I mean, we've used them on the 450 in certain places, and we're gonna keep using them on this because for, just to be frank, there's really nothing better. But, and it's gonna get the job done in terms of covering up this white stuff, but just be prepared. If you use these, they're not gonna fit like a factory part. They're not perfect. They're inexpensive, they're thin carbon fiber, it's not gonna add much weight to your motorcycle. It adds a nice look, it adds a layer of protection. So I think they're worth the cost, but just be mindful, this stuff's not perfect. Looks really good though, so once the bodywork's on, I don't think that's gonna be obvious at all. This should more or less be covered, but just something to manage some expectations. If you buy this stuff, it ain't perfect. All right, so we've got everything kind of fitted up. We've still got some work to do to sort of get this finalized, but you can sort of get an idea of the look and overall design. Everything looks pretty good. Right side is pretty much as expected, other than this little guy. We're still waiting on a response from how to handle that, which is atypical. Normally we don't have fitment issues like that on the right side. You just have to see what they say. On the left side, everything went together nicely. You can see we have a nice blank slate now. There is for sure going to have to be some adjustment, and this is expected. It's like this every time. You can see, you know, the bodywork is not designed to accommodate an exhaust right there, so we're just going to have to clearance some of this. The funny thing is, it looks like you'd really just have to kind of skim a little bit here, but I've found that often once you clear this, it kind of pulls in some of the other area. So we might have to cut out this as well. Sorry, this as well. But at the very least, we're going to have to kind of just skim this part out here. So we'll see how that goes. And then we've got this kickstand on here. You can see right now it's got this stuff on it. That's because we have the clearance issue there. That's not going to work. We don't want that knocking dents into the can. So what we're going to do is take the kickstand off, and we're going to put a stop in here to limit the travel back. So if we stop it, say like right there, it would be fine. So that's kind of the idea. What we're going to do, we're probably going to drill and tap that spot and just put a little screw in there. That way we can adjust it, and we'll put some washers or something underneath the head so there's no excessive load on the shaft, and should be good. Then we've got the headlight all set up. This thing is actually super bright. Probably not something you'd want to run on a street bike because technically it doesn't have a high beam anymore. We'll show you how it looks. So the high beam is off, and then when you press the low beam on, it comes on, and that thing is super bright. you can see. So that's a nice piece. And of course we've got the factory tail light and stuff on here. That all works. So yeah, coming along nicely. The other thing with this, I noticed the CMT cover was kind of pushing the gasket out of the fuel cap, so I kind of stuffed it back under there, but I think long term we're gonna have to cut away some of this tank cover to make it not stress the gasket underneath this like quick turn fuel cap. So yeah, next Martin's gonna cut away at the left side panel or whatever. We're gonna do something to find clearance. He's talked about potentially using heat to shift it. We haven't tried that before, so I'm not sure if it's gonna work or not, but something we're going to look at, and at the very least we'll go ahead and start working on this. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and get our dash set up, and to mount this we're using this. It's an AIM product. It's designed to just basically go on top of your handlebar mounts, and pretty simple setup. We're going to actually have to modify it though to work with our X-Trigs that we have on this bike right now, and to do that we're just going to reference this kind of cut up one that I did for the 450 SMR. Martin's just going to reference the sort of shape of that and probably do a nicer job than I did with this one, but it just allows it to clear these, and once that's done it goes on just fine. So we're going to go ahead and get working on that, and we're also going to go ahead and mount up our carbon frame guards. We have something from CMT, just a nice little aesthetic upgrade that'll complement the other carbon pieces that we have. He's got those right there. All right, so we've hacked this thing up. We just used a fresh razor blade. Obviously not perfect, but it'll get the job done. I might actually open that one up a little bit more. And we literally just used this guy. Super easy. Just cuts right through this stuff. And I stopped right at the little foam seam where it's manufactured. And then after that, you'll see there's a little steel plate back there with some screws. We're just gonna tighten those up. That's what holds it in. And then you just mount it up. So we've got this thing pretty well wrapped up for now. We've got our Solo2 bar pad and connection all set up, which this will not only provide all the data that we need, but also charges the Solo2 when you're running. So even if the battery's dead while the bike's running, this will at least keep the thing on, which is a useful feature. And while we were at it, we did get the carbon swing arm covers installed. I can't remember if I already mentioned that, but those went on pretty well. We used some double-sided tape, and for sure they creaked a little bit when we were torquing everything down. So again, not a perfect fit, but It's a nice look, and for sure nicer than the plastic ones we had on there before, which were from our customer who had it previously. And of course we're gonna put vinyl on this, so right now it's a blank slate. But we're not, I think we're just gonna, I'm gonna start the bike, show you the dash, and then we're gonna call this one a wrap, because I want to go ahead and make this live so you guys can see it. And then for the next video, we'll continue with the cutting up the body work, put this thing on the dyno, do some work, and we've got a whole bunch of other really nice upgrades coming. So this is going to be a super fun project. But in the meantime, let's just see what it looks like with it fired up. So you can see this is the display that I've configured. So we have GPS speed, engine coolant temperature, gear position, and engine speed. And we have other displays set up on this one. This is for track use, so you can see these are some others that we've done. An idea, and that's fully customizable, but that's how I have it set up for now. I think that's useful information for riding on the street. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for this one. Everything looks good. We'll do a walk around. I think that'll do it. And I'd like to comment that we're not going to leave these handguards on there. Again, these were on there as the bike came in, so I think they kind of clash, and I prefer the Zeta units, which we're going to use. Those are going to look really good. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this one. So stay tuned, because for sure we have some super exciting upgrades. The bike's going to make some major advancements in the next couple of videos. It's going to be way overkill for the street, but it's going to be super nice. So I'm excited to get into it. Have a nice path planned for this motorcycle. So thanks for watching this one. Be sure to comment below if there's something you want to see, if you have any questions, and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Thanks.